Welcome to the ClimateTech Podcast. My name is Lasse Hemmingsen, and in this episode, we're going to look at solar powered irrigation and how to help scale a commercially driven solar powered irrigation market to help smallholder farmers grow their crops and adapt to climate change. With me are three people who all have inside knowledge of the supplier side of the Ugandan solar irrigation market, and who will share their experiences both on what they can see working and on the barriers they're facing in expanding a sustainable market. It's Victor Kazimiri, the CEO of Akvo International, Vincent Sseremba, CEO of Tulima Solar, and Douglas Baguma, the CEO of Innovex Uganda and the chairman of the Uganda Solar Energy Association. Thanks a lot for joining, Vincent, Victor, and Douglas.
Thank you, Lasse.
Pleasure.
There are many reasons to talk about solar powered irrigation and irrigation. And in Uganda, I know there's a national goal to have 1.5 million hectares under irrigation by 2040, so in 14 years, which requires additional irrigation of about 70,000 hectares per year. Unfortunately, the current level of implementation is about 1,000 hectares per year, so there's a big gap between the goals and what's needed in the country and what's actually happening. So I'm really glad that you're all here we can talk about how commercially driven private sector models can help close this gap for irrigation, and specifically how solar powered irrigation can do this. So to start, I would like to hear from you guys, because these are big numbers and it's a national level, but from your point of view, from your perspectives, how big is the opportunity for solar irrigation in Uganda right now? And we're going to start just going around the table, and let's start on my screen. Vincent is at the top, so we can start with you, Vincent, if that's okay.
Pleasure. So the driver for irrigation and farmers needing water for production is because of global climate change. I think it's bar none since 15 years ago. Sort of like the incremental weather has been experienced in all across like sub-Saharan Africa, and that's why we had at that time some good success in Tanzania due to that demand. But also the other contributing factor is availability of water on the surface for soil, so that it can easily be accessible to farmers. So that's the reason why we had ended up with two countries, Uganda and Zambia. So we tend to, for last mile smallholder farmers mostly, and then work through a system where they actually upgrade, and we also offer financing and after sales service for the irrigation solutions that we provide them. So in this market, we tend to find a lot of fragmentation in terms of land, vis-a-vis Tanzania where we operate. So right now, average acreage, because of the last mile tendencies of our companies and financing and the whole model that we offer, the average acreage tends to be like around 1.5 acres. So of course that makes it, even if I said, hey, I sold 1,000 systems in terms of irrigation systems, in terms of the number to get to the hectare or to get to the acreage that we need, it becomes a little bit tough because of that nature. I think I'll leave it there for now, so that Victor and I think Douglas can also build on that.
Yeah, thank you. Because if we're talking small acre sizes, that still means we have a lot more farmers to reach. So looking at the opportunity means, in a positive way, there's a bigger opportunity because there's a lot more people to reach. But yeah, Victor, do you wanna come in with your perspective on the opportunities?
Yes. So I go straight away to the point of Uganda's potential for solar irrigation. I tell you that Uganda has the biggest opportunity for solar irrigation in Africa. Why? Uganda is blessed with water resources. Uganda has the largest water resources, both ground and surface. Secondly, Uganda receives very good solar radiation throughout the year. So solar pumping won't be affected in any way all year round. On the other hand, Uganda's agriculture the sector employs more than 70% of the population. Now, the question remains, why is it that only 3% of the irrigable land is irrigated?
Mhm.
And what does that show us? There is a massive opportunity for solar irrigation still untapped in Uganda.
Mhm. I mean, it seems like a huge potential, and also a lot of people who could have their lives and their farms improved, and also build resilience to climate change, like Vincent mentions. So that brings us to you, Douglas, and your perspective, both from Innovex, but also from the overall, as you're the chairman of the Uganda Solar Energy Association, to maybe have also the helicopter view.
Yes, hello everyone. So specifically talking about solar irrigation in Uganda, the big opportunity is however much Uganda is rich in water resources, the problem is one, the water does not exist where the farmer needs it. You sometimes find that in as much as a farmer with water source, the water source is probably between 100 to even more than a kilometer away from where it is actually needed. So they probably need to irrigate a huge piece of land, however much the water exists. The other challenge, which I could say is an opportunity for irrigation, is the fact that many Ugandan farmers today depend on rain-fed agriculture. So they always try to time the rains, the seasons,
Mhm.
and that is when they decide to plant. And that is where the big problem comes, because what is happening today is the weather, the climate is becoming very unpredictable. You plant expecting it to rain, and guess what you get? Lots of sun, scorching sun, and that leads to losses for very many farmers. And looking at the size of these farmers, it's very hard for them to recover from such losses. So that really is where the problem and the opportunity lies for solar water pumping.
Mhm.
For the farmers, with solar water pumping, they no longer need to rely on the weather. So come rain, come shine, sunshine, with the solar water pump, you are in control of your planting season. That really is the key benefit.
Mhm.
And of course, it's also an established fact that farmers who are irrigating multiply their yields by up to 4 times compared to those that are not. So yes, there's a really huge opportunity for those two major challenges. There's a huge opportunity created for solar water irrigation in Uganda.
Mhm. And the double-sidedness of it's an opportunity to increase yields and improve lives of smallholder farmers. But at the same time, if you don't have irrigation, you have people who are very dependent on rainfall and dependent on, or at risk when this changes. So it's not just about improving yields, it's also about resilience and being able to survive in a world with increasing climate change. If we look at, because you all three work for companies that are implementing solar powered irrigation, so I think it'd be really interesting to hear what's working today, and then we can build on that and talk about what would make it better, what barriers are there for having things work even better. But today, who is adopting the solar powered irrigation, and what is it that has worked for them and for you to get these systems installed? And now I have to choose someone to start. We can do Victor this time, and we can change it up along the way.
Looking at the solar irrigation sector today, majorly it's working for, firstly, the smallholder farmers who are depending on the available subsidy programs, whereby the subsidy covers 60% of the cost of the solar irrigation system. So we are seeing the biggest uptake coming now currently from this arrangement. But on the other hand, we have commercial farmers that are taking up these irrigation systems on their own. Then we also have the market and organized groups. You can say cooperatives and organized groups. It becomes easier and cheaper to deliver solar powered irrigation systems to a group as compared to single individuals because of the costs involved. So when a group contributes collectively by all members, you find that they are able to acquire a large system that can serve multiple users. So we have those organized groups, and then we have the commercial farmers, and then the smallholder farmers that are depending mainly on the government subsidy programs. That's where we are seeing the most uptake currently in the three areas.
Okay. Is that from your point of view, Douglas, is that the same picture that to reach these smallholder farmers we were talking about before, you need some kind of financial subsidy or help or grant?
So yes, there's definitely a significant gap. In as much as the technology exists, the problem of access is still key, and this is caused by that upfront payment. Of course, this is majorly because when you look at many of the target population, the smallholder farmers, do not have enough capital to afford the technologies upfront. I don't want to say that technology is expensive because it can only become so cheap. So the problem is that lack of that initial capital. And sometimes you find that the capital is also competing with the capital to actually do the planting. So they get into a debate, do I really need to irrigate? Even if I'm not going to get the 4x, at least I'll get something when I do the planting. So it's that low income, many of the farmers are really low income, and there's that barrier. So of course, interventions such as the subsidy program is a huge, it's a huge, it's one of the biggest ways of solving that problem. When, as at the association, when we talked to, of course, we were a bit worried about the subsidies because there were questions around what happens when the subsidy goes away. But when you look at the objective of this program, it's more to create that awareness, at least for the first 3, 4, 5 years, is to create that awareness and for the farmers to appreciate that this technology can actually multiply their yields. Of course, other initiatives beyond subsidies could be finding ways to enable the farmers, to pay over a long period of time, as opposed to paying, to the cash payments. And this, can be done through financing, having, beyond just the technology provider, the solar business, also looking at partnering a financial institution such that they can provide financing for such transactions. So we believe that is key. At least that proved to be key in the solar lighting area. So before the industry moved to productive use, we had this very huge fight against use of kerosene lamps. And because of financing and models such as pay as you go, today it is rare that you'll find anyone using a kerosene lamp in Uganda, at least in Uganda.
So there's something to be learned from the rollout of solar lighting. This also leads us on to you, Vincent, and Tulima, and your experiences in who's adopting these solar powered irrigation systems, and what has worked in your experience in terms of getting over this barrier with the upfront payment.
Yes, so I think to what I think Victor and Douglas have said, it's basically the approach in this day and age, where when we look at the last mile context, I remember like when we began within Uganda, the biggest challenge at that particular time was just people getting to know that there's actually pumps and systems that can be powered, irrigation systems that can be powered by solar. I think that was like the biggest challenge of the day. And then came affordability. Now that we know how the technology works, we have demonstrated it, we understand that it avails a resource that we didn't have due to climate change, then how do we afford it? So it's been, I think for us, it's been what we call blended financing, a bit of RBFs, a bit of grants, but grants coming from sometimes development partners, but at times like private entities that are contracted by development partners. Development partners do have a lot of livelihood programs in different areas, depending on what the interventions are. And it's a combination of those because, as you would imagine, the access that Douglas talked about, access has to do with obviously the capital that's upfront, but also access at times has to do with is the technology readily available? And if I'm going to access the technology, can the service provider be readily available to provide me after sales service in case something goes wrong, right? But all of that comes at a cost, right? So that's why I'm saying like the blended actually helps. Like at times there's been, the likes of like GIZ, Massive for World Food Program, FAO, a lot of other entities that have stepped in to help to ensure that that access is provided to the smallholder farmer. The other one that I think Douglas touched on that has also helped us is asset financing through basically pay-as-you-go. We're lucky that we had already launched pay-as-you-go within our own ecosystem. And the majority, I think back then, the majority of the farmers that actually took on the systems are ones that were under financing, where they pay a small deposit that was roughly 25% down payment of the cash system. Then, in a period of about like 22 months, they'll pay the balance through a pay-as-you-go sort of arrangement. What has actually happened? Through banks, there's been green funds that have come into most of these banks. Some of them are tailored towards cooperatives. Others can be tailored towards like individuals. So we have utilized those of late quite a bit due to, I think, government and the other entities recognizing the fact that access to capital is a big constraint. What they have done is that they have lowered that down payment to like roughly 10%, given the farmer a grace period of about 4 months or so, and then they start making the payments. So those interventions have definitely helped, and I think going forward, if we can improve them and ensure that it's blended and it's flexible, especially to the customer, then we'll see the uptake that we need to see.
Mm-hmm. And then uptake also without the need for direct subsidies, and then these programs that come in from the outside, but then also at some point end, and then you don't have the sustainable market that can keep driving uptake.
Yeah.
I think also what we've seen from UNEP Copenhagen Climate Center in the work we've done in Uganda is that these pay-go services and other lease contract formats, they really work for farmers if, like you say, it's aligned with harvest seasons, or they have time to actually get the benefits of the systems before they have to start paying back. Because as I think also Douglas mentioned, it's a big investment, and it could be either getting the seeds and the input or get the irrigation system, and then you have to have something to sell for the next season, so you have to go with the seeds.
Yeah, that's correct. It's always, I think as Douglas mentioned earlier, it's always a tug of war, especially like with cash flow management. The biggest pushback, as I've mentioned, for us that came in with just the pay-as-you-go model was basically that I have to, even if the down payment is about 25% of the total cost of the system, maybe 25 to like 40%, there's still a tug of war there a little bit. So it's nice to see that these models are coming up. But I guess the biggest question is like how sustainable, like are they like for the long term or for the medium term when we're shifting out of the RBFs. That's why I sort of like maintain. I think in the next probably 3 to 5 years, it's important that we hold steady, and instead of like getting rid of all the blended financing, You just take layers off of it to ensure that all the parties that are at play, whether it is the customer, the service providers, have a good grounding in the economics before you pull everything out, so to speak.
And let's also pass the question on to Victor and Douglas on how we get to that sustainable point. Victor, do you want to come in first on building on what Vincent said on how we introduce these more sustainable market models and how well they work and what works best in your perspective?
Basically, what's needed here, as Vincent has been saying and as Douglas said earlier, there is an issue of financing. Banks tend to have a perceived risk. They tend to fear risk of lending to the farmers. Even with the pay-go model, they have still not felt comfortable to give out food to farmers. So I'm looking at a way of bringing in financial institutions at the beginning of these projects, to involve them at the beginning so that they get informed, they get involved in the planning so that they are able to plan solutions, financing solutions that are tailored to the needs of the farmers at the end of the project, so that there is sustainability, so that you see, this requires a collective effort where you have a supplier, a local company supplying the solar irrigation equipment, you have the financing institution, you have the government backup, and then the farmer himself. So it becomes a complete chain. Otherwise, when you have one missing, then you know that you cannot be supported. And financing will still remain a challenge if financial institutions are not involved at the planning phase.
So it sounds like a very holistic approach. You have to look at everything, maybe not at the same time, but involve everyone in the process. Before I go to you, Douglas, I also want to just bring in another aspect of these solar powered irrigation systems, that there's the opportunity for digital monitoring of the use and of what's happening with the systems and how the farmers, what the benefits are for the farmers. And that extra layer of data, is that something that you can also see would reduce the risk perception from financial institutions? So is that happening, or could it happen? Well, let's start with Douglas on that one, and then you can come in if you want, Victor. Yeah, and Vincent also if you want. But Douglas first.
Okay, so speaking to financing, so I think one, personally, I believe it's a mistake. Looking at financing only from banks. Yes, banks could potentially be the probably biggest source of financing. But when we probe them further, and maybe why they have this perceived risk, we actually find that it's usually because of a government policy, the high regulation, that they find it difficult to lend to most times the business that is deploying this solar technology. Sometimes the policy says there has to be collateral. If there's no collateral, the bank will be penalized. So that's why I think it's better to look at financing from a broader perspective of other sources of financing. We have the microfinance institutions from different tiers. You also have the venture capitalists, the private equity funds, and the like. So when you look at it in that way, then I think a number of solutions start to come up. Why it could be hard for a bank to finance a product such as a solar pump, because when you look at why they are not, as we mentioned, the cash flows start coming after the planting is done. But when with bank financing, you immediately need to start paying the next month, which does not really align with the realities of this particular business, the farmers.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes, I believe that access to data, the more data, the better opportunities that are opened up for financing solar pumping for farmers. I think before most of the data that is available, when you look at the process of on-lending, it's usually KYC data. Who is this farmer, or who is this company, and what does their balance sheet look like? Do they have the capacity to pay? Do they have some sort of collateral? But with more data that could either come from credit rating, from history of transactions, and if you also add the layer of data on performance of this equipment which has been deployed, then you have a better chance or a better opportunity to predict payments, which becomes interesting to financial institutions, or even better for the banks. Because what the banks and the financial institutions want to see is that predictability between someone who can pay and someone who is not going to pay, but also very importantly, how someone is going to pay. That is very important. So that is the additional layer of data that performance data can provide. I just wanted to add on, beyond financing, the other dimension that I can look at, how we can open up solar irrigation in Uganda. I mean, you could, beyond finance, you could look at the entire value chain. The fact is, most of this technology is imported, and from that, there is limited value addition in the value chain of solar pumps in the Ugandan economy. And this is a huge problem. When you look at where most of the value is coming from, the local markets are only left with low value of sales and distribution and maintenance. So actually, through Innovex, this is one of the interventions that we're doing. We are the first company that started manufacturing solar pumps on the continent, and their entire objective is around value addition to the local ecosystem.
There's a lot more potential in solar powered irrigation than just, and that's a very big quotation mark around just helping the smallholder farmers. It can be a boost for the entire economy. But before I move on to the next questions, I also want to just give Victor and Vincent the chance to come in on both the local value chain part, but also what we talked about before with access to finance and data. Victor, you had something you wanted to add before, I think.
Before even that, you see, we are majorly talking about financing for the farmer, but what about the local companies, the solar irrigation companies? So we have, first of all, limited or no access to financing by the farmer. And on the other hand, also, it's hard for the local companies to access affordable financing solutions for use to import the irrigation equipment, for use to open up the distribution networks in the hard-to-reach areas across the country, and for use to provide the after-sales services across the country. So with that kind of issue on both ends, the challenge cuts across on the side of farmers and on the side of the local companies to be in position to reach the last mile market where the end user is.
That's a good point.
Though with data, as Douglas was mentioning, now we are coming up with solutions where we are presenting to banks and they are getting attracted when they know that we are remotely monitoring these systems from our offices and we are seeing daily on how they are performing and helping the farmers to improve their yields. Then banks are now getting attracted. So I'm seeing a remote monitoring being of great importance in attracting banks to finance the farmers directly.
Okay. And now we have to bring in Vincent, because that was a lot of different topics that was covered, and of course I also want your input on it. We've talked about data, like Douglas just talked about, but also finance for business. Instead of looking at the farmer side, but the local business side, what is the need there, and what are the barriers? But I'm going to let you start wherever you feel is most important, and then we'll see where we go.
Okay, sounds good. So maybe I'll chime in on the last topic there. Actually, what we are doing differently at Tulima Solar is the whole question that I think Victor and Douglas have mentioned about bankability from a bank perspective. As these clients most of our customers are acquiring these systems through these RBFs and grant opportunities. What we actually have is we have a very specific team that is following them on in terms of, we call it like the internal engagement team, so to speak. So we, of course, through PayGo, because they're traceable, we know where their farms are. We basically understand how they transact or who they sell their produce to. So we have embarked on a journey to basically monitor them for the next like 3 to 5 years, but with the goal of building up a database of data that will prove to the banks that they're actually bankable. And it's not only to prove to the banks, but there's also like a stretch of insurance companies that are also interested. Banks are not only, and it has gotten to a place in terms of this impact data, so to speak. And as Victor mentioned, having the financial institutions be involved in the design for what impact data you're collecting, with the goal for that data to be leveraged in the interest of the customer and also in the interest of the service providers as well. Now, I think your now question is what on local funding for companies. I lost my train of thought.
Yeah, because that was something that I think all three of you actually brought up when I talked to you earlier. That because I started out thinking and talking about finance for farmers and different models for that, and how we can build this market where farmers can afford the systems in a sustainable market. But then this other issue was brought up, but how about the companies that are selling these products? They also need financing to scale and to reach their customers.
Yeah, and I think I couldn't have said it better than what Victor stated. It's been really tough, and it is tough, especially in Uganda. So it's an environment that is actually ready for investing, but it's just that the capital is just not there. So we're left with, as Victor said, a bank that provide very, very high interest rates. And if they provide those high interest rates, we have to pass them on, unfortunately, to the end user. And
then it gets more expensive for the farmers.
Exactly.
All right, we're running kind of close to where we need to be time-wise. Is there anything else that either of you want to talk about and bring to the table before we get to the final question?
Maybe I could add to Vincent's submission. You'll find that the banks, yes, do have money, but the issue, I think, is about the attractiveness of the industry, because they don't find this market, solar water pumping, attractive yet. Of course, because they don't understand it, they are not lending to the market. It does not mean that it is not safe to lend to solar water pump businesses or even the farmers. It's just that they don't, or they have not taken proactive action to understand that yet.
Mm-hmm. And then for putting a positive spin on that means that there's a tipping point at some point where
exactly,
if this understanding is created, the finance will be available and the market can really start picking up speed.
I mean, we've seen this in other markets. PayGo is a model. It is how people are selling anything out there. And I believe that has the potential to unlock this market for Africa.
Mm-hmm. Okay, then let's get into like concrete recommendations here. So this is and I know this is a hard question, but I'm going to ask each of you to name 3 things that could unlock large-scale commercial solar irrigation in Uganda. If you want to go first, Victor.
One is financing for the farmers. The other one is support with easy access to finance for the local companies that are in solar irrigation. And the third one is the government coordination with the private sector and the financial institutions and the development partners. But on the access to finance for the farmers, providing innovative financing solutions for farmers. There is one key part I want to add on that. These solutions should also be aligning well with the agricultural income cycles. Otherwise, we have an issue here also of farmers being asked for payments immediately, even without a grace period. But they have not yet harvested. How do they pay? So we also need to take that as a big factor.
The financing solutions have to be adapted to the people who are going to be using them. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yes, otherwise, if we combine the right financing models plus government support, favorable government policy, and the strong supplier network, then Uganda will easily even take the leading position in solar power irrigation. We lead in the market of Africa.
That would be the perfect result for this. Vincent, do you want to give it a shot at three things that has to happen to unlock a sustainable solar power irrigation market?
Yes. So briefly, the first one is water resource development. As much as there's a lot of access to water within Uganda, very close to the surface, we are always finding ourselves where we survey clients are really very, very interested in the solutions, but the one thing that they have to invest in is the shallow well. This is a very big issue.
Mm-hmm.
People having access to water is a very big issue, and that was a big hindrance. So that's one big limiting factor. The next one is something that I think we alluded to in the discussion. It's sort of like that next level value addition. The issue of how could they actually earn more per acre is limited by sort of them not being able to actually value add to whatever they've produced. We are seeing it as a limiting factor for people that have shown success in primary production for either crops or livestock. So I think in terms of having people like expand their farms, expand their production, get bigger pumps, do things bigger, I think there needs to be, we need to address the issue of value addition.
So this is like the next step after they get the irrigation system and they have the extra produce.
Right. The last one is what Victor has just basically talked about in terms of like access to financing, but it's not just financing in its own sense, but it's blended that actually touches every aspect of the value chain that serves the customer. So whether it is it's us, the service providers, the aggregators, or people that are doing value addition that buy the food or the crops or the produce from the farmers. So runs, RBLs, things that are blended, that are innovative, that can actually move everybody along and not like bits and pieces and then create like other issues in the market. Those are my three big wishes.
I'm glad there's some overlap in what you think is important, because it would be, if we got like 9 or 10 different things that needs to be done, it's a lot more. So that takes us to you, Douglas, and your recommendations for what should happen before this market can really take off.
Yeah, so there's actually broad evidence from sub-Saharan Africa showing that solar irrigation uptake is held back by a combination of, I think, what we call perceived risk or uncovered risks. There's also, the weak incentives, limited local capacity, and, the underdeveloped value chains. So the answer is not just, more solar pumps or hardware. It's really stronger market systems, looking at the entire value chain, all the players. That is right from the financiers, which could include the banks, microfinance institutions, plus, of course, the pay-go models. We have the distribution networks, technical installation, maintenance and spare parts, farmer training, market information, and of course, the aspect of the data. So without, if any of this is not working, this will not scale. It will be very hard for this to scale. So a farmer may want a solar pump, but if financing and installation are missing, then the market really will fail. So for me, it's really looking at the market systems, which of course will also include the uptake. After the farmer has multiplied the yields by 4, then what next? That really is how we're going to transform solar irrigation and scale equipment sales in Uganda.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And I guess I should have known that a question like this didn't have an easy answer. Markets are complicated, and there's a lot of actors at play. I'm going to try to see if I can summarize what the three of you have said. We have talked a lot about finance, and you also talk about blended finance here, and there has to be these different solutions that fit the purpose, both for the farmers and for the businesses. And first of all, there needs to be water, like Vincent mentioned. If you don't have the water resource, you can't irrigate. But then with the blended finance, that hopefully also creates a stronger private sector. That also needs government support. You need the government to have the right policies to support this private sector and coordinate with the financial institutions and with the donors and create this stronger market that also lowers the perceived risks. And then the next step would then be, and that I'm glad you talked about this as well, that it doesn't end when the farmer gets irrigation system and they don't have to rely on rainfall patterns that are changing. They can harvest more often, they can harvest more. But then what? To really have an impact, you need to also then look at the next steps. And as you said, Douglas, the value chain, also that important point that it's not just about the farmers. It can create a whole positive cycle of job creation and investment.
Exactly.
That's also a good note to end the podcast. That's what we're hoping for and working towards. So thank you, Vincent and Victor and Douglas, for joining me today. It was very interesting conversation.
Thank you, Les.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Victor. Thanks, Douglas.
And thanks also to our listeners. If you would like to know more about solar powered irrigation systems and the creation of commercially viable markets for these for smallholder farmers and for others, both in Uganda and other countries, there are links in the show notes.